I think it's taken over 400 million.
Not bad.
Huge.
Pierce Brosnan has just shared a startling revelation that took everyone by surprise. Now 71, the former James Bond actor is confronting a harsh reality. His life has been marked by heartbreaking losses. His first wife tragically passed away from ovarian cancer at just 43, and years later, his daughter succumbed to the very same illness at 41. Today, something new has emerged that's compelling Brosnan to confront a fear he has long tried to suppress. The man who once portrayed cinema's most unshakable spy is now grappling with a deeply personal struggle, one he may not be able to conquer, and his next steps have left many of his fans extremely concerned. Born on May 16, 1953, in the town of Drogheda, Ireland, Pierce Brosnan's entry into the world was far from glamorous. He was raised without riches, privilege, or even a solid family foundation. Most notably absent was his father, Thomas Brosnan, a carpenter, who left so early in Pierce's life that the boy retained no memory of his face, his voice, or even the sound of his footsteps. It was as if the man had vanished without a trace. His mother, May, was suddenly burdened with raising a child alone. She worked tirelessly as a nurse, doing her best to hold together the threads of a family that were already unraveling. In 1957, she made a gut-wrenching decision to move to London in search of work, leaving 4-year-old Pierce behind in Ireland. Though the separation was intended to be brief, it dragged on for 7 long years. During that time, Pierce was shuffled from one relative to another, starting with his grandparents in Navan, then to an uncle and aunt in Trim. Each move meant new routines, unfamiliar faces, and no lasting bonds. He never remained in one place long enough to feel at home, and he gradually learned to be silent, to observe quietly, and to simply endure. Always the outsider, always the new kid, he became adept at disappearing into the background. Teachers noticed his intelligence, but he was often distant, his attention always drifting out the window, seemingly somewhere else. Then, in 1964, a major shift occurred. At the age of 11, Pierce relocated to Scotland to live with his mother and her new husband, William Carmichael, a factory worker known for his patience and kindness. Though William tried to build a bond with Pierce, the transition stirred complex emotions. Reunited with the mother he barely knew, Pierce was happy but also confused and resentful. This man, gentle though he was not his father. Still, William extended warmth and understanding, introducing Pierce to basic skills like fishing and home repairs, and offering him the chance to relearn trust. He never attempted to take the place of Pierce's missing parent, and that quiet respect left a lasting impression. One day, William brought Pierce to the cinema to see a film. The year was 1964, and the movie was Goldfinger. Watching Sean Connery as the indomitable James Bond on the big screen was a life-altering experience. Bond represented everything Pierce felt he lacked: power, self-assurance, command. In that dark theater, a spark was lit. Pierce didn't just admire Bond, he wanted to become someone like him. By the age of 16, Pierce made a bold choice. He left school in London and enrolled at St. Martin's School of Art. With barely any money and no concrete roadmap, he followed a burning desire to pursue painting. He idolized artists like Lucian Freud and Francis Bacon, and survived on tea and toast while many of his classmates came from affluent families. Despite the odds, he pushed himself to prove he belonged in that creative space. Acting had yet to cross his mind. His energy was focused entirely on visual art. But fate intervened in 1971. While still an art student, Pierce stumbled upon a theater group rehearsing in South London. One of the performers, a fire eater, was practicing his routine. Rather than walk away, Pierce was curious and asked to try. That impromptu moment opened an unexpected door. The group recognized in him a rare blend of fearlessness and presence, and they welcomed him in. Though he had never acted before, something clicked. He'd found an arena that demanded risk and charisma, just like Bond, and he dove in headfirst. He soon joined the Drama Centre London, enrolling in its rigorous 3-year program from 1973 to 1976. The training was intense. Over 60% of students dropped out before finishing. The instructors were demanding, pushing students to their emotional limits and then rebuilding them. Many couldn't take it. Some cracked under pressure. But Pierce endured. He juggled part-time jobs while immersing himself in the works of Shakespeare, learning mime, and even practicing circus arts. Tuition was £1,200 a year, a steep price at the time, but he never considered quitting. In 1976, he landed his first major acting role in a stage thriller titled Wait Until Dark. He played a character that unsettled audiences with his cold demeanor. The director saw a chilling quality in him, something sharp, unnerving, and it worked. A year later, Pierce embraced a challenging role in Tennessee Williams' The Red Devil Battery Sign, a play that had already failed in America. But in London, Pierce's performance breathed new life into the script, earning him critical praise. Slowly, he was making his mark. The next logical step was film. In 1980, Pierce had a blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearance in The Mirror Cracked with Elizabeth Taylor. He was on screen for less than half a minute and earned only £50, but it was a start. That same year, he took a small role in The Long Good Friday, acting alongside Helen Mirren and Bob Hoskins. Though the film didn't make waves initially, it later gained cult status. And there was Pierce, quietly, steadily working his way into the spotlight. By 1982, Brosnan was still relatively unknown outside of the UK. He had collected a few credits in British television and theatre, but nothing that turned heads, until he auditioned for a minor part in a new American TV series called Remington Steele. Initially, he was only considered for a cameo, a murder victim. That should have been the end of it. But the casting directors noticed something remarkable: an innate charm, magnetic screen presence, and undeniable appeal. They called him back, not for a walk-on role, but to audition as the lead. The original concept for Remington Steele involved a seasoned American con artist in his 50s. Brosnan, at just 29, was young, Irish, and unknown in the US. Still, producers were intrigued. Over 200 actors auditioned, many with bigger names, but Brosnan stood out. His accent nearly cost him the job, as network executives worried American viewers might reject a foreign lead. But once he stepped into the role, he was electric. Suave, enigmatic, effortlessly cool. He was Remington Steele. The series premiered on October 1st, 1982, and was an instant success, becoming NBC's second highest rated new show that year with 15.6 million viewers weekly. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The show was cancelled after its fourth season in 1986, prompting an outcry from loyal fans. Responding to the backlash, the network reversed its decision, bringing it back for a final run. When the last episode aired in February 1987, it drew nearly 26 million viewers, an ending most television shows can only dream of. Remington Steele proved to be a massive financial success for NBC, generating upwards of $50 million annually through advertising alone. When international syndication was factored in, the show's revenue ballooned by an additional $200 million. Broadcast in over 80 countries, it had a wide-reaching global impact. But something unusual happened stateside between 1983 and 1987. Applications for private investigator licenses in the US surged by a staggering 340%. Clearly, the charm and intellect of Pierce Brosnan's suave character resonated deeply with the public. Yet, with that kind of stardom, came unintended consequences. Just 2 months into the show's premiere, critics began advocating for Brosnan to be cast as the next James Bond. In January 1983, Entertainment Weekly declared him the most Bond-esque actor to grace the screen since Sean Connery. Soon afterward, none other than Albert Cubby Broccoli, the producer of the Bond films, took notice. By 1984, public speculation had reached a fever pitch, and NBC played into the intrigue by marketing Brosnan with undertones of a secret agent persona. A TV guide cover even provocatively asked whether he was the next 007. Adding to the buzz, Anne Fleming, widow of Bond creator Ian Fleming, stated that Brosnan both looked and carried himself exactly as her husband had imagined the iconic spy. Meanwhile, Brosnan's credibility as an actor was rapidly ascending. That same year, he earned a Golden Globe nomination for portraying the title role in Nancy Astor. Despite it being only his second major television role, he was nominated alongside giants like Anthony Hopkins and John Gielgud. Insiders revealed that Brosnan narrowly lost, by just 3 votes, a testament to how much his performance had moved even the skeptical real-life Astor family, who had initially objected to the production. The road to becoming Bond, however, was not straightforward. Contrary to common belief, Brosnan was not first offered the role in 1985. He had been considered as early as 1983, during pre-production for A View to a Kill. Roger Moore, then unsure about reprising his role, left the door open for a replacement, and Brosnan, who had met Broccoli on the set of For Your Eyes Only, where his wife Cassandra Harris had a small part, was being seriously eyed. Broccoli reportedly took one look at the young actor and said, "If he can act, he's my man." Yet fear got the best of the studio, and Moore was lured back with a massive offer, over $3.5 million to return as Bond. That meant Brosnan's moment had to wait. But in 1986, fate dealt an even crueler twist. Though Remington Steele had already been cancelled, news broke that Brosnan was the frontrunner for Bond, and suddenly the show's ratings skyrocketed. Sensing opportunity, NBC reversed the cancellation and ordered a brief fifth season. Still bound by contract, Brosnan found himself trapped, unable to take on the role he'd been groomed for. In a bitter twist, the same Bond rumors that had propelled his stardom were now the chains keeping him from seizing it. As he completed filming for the final Remington Steele episodes, the Bond producers moved on, offering the role to Timothy Dalton. That decision would mark a turning point not just for Brosnan, but for the entire Bond franchise. Dalton, a personal friend of Brosnan, took The Spy in a more grounded, serious direction. A move that did not resonate in the US License to Kill underperformed domestically, bringing in only $34 million. Watching from the sidelines, Brosnan couldn't help but feel the sting. He believed he would have brought a different energy to the role. Between 1986 and 1994, a period often referred to by fans as Brosnan's lost Bond years, the actor didn't retreat from the spotlight. Instead, he made a series of calculated moves. In 1987, he took on the role of a British intelligence agent in The Fourth Protocol, a Cold War espionage thriller that flirted with Bond-like territory. A year earlier, in Nomads, he showcased his versatility in a darker, supernatural narrative. He even leaned into the 007 mystique through stylish Diet Coke commercials, where he portrayed a debonair, tuxedo-clad hero, a subtle yet unmistakable homage to Bond. Brosnan's personal life was also taking shape during this era. He had met Cassandra Harris in the late 1970s. Born Sandra Colleen Waits in Sydney in 1948, Cassandra was already a working actress when their paths crossed. Their chemistry was undeniable from the start. What began as a casual admiration quickly evolved into a full-blown romance, and they eventually settled down together in Wimbledon. On December 27, 1980, they married. Cassandra had recently endured a difficult divorce and was raising two children, Charlotte and Christopher, from her previous marriage. Pierce stepped in without hesitation, embracing the role of a father figure with quiet strength. When Cassandra's ex-husband Dermot Harris passed away in 1986, Pierce made the commitment legal by adopting both children. To him, it wasn't just a formality. It was about love and belonging. Having grown up without a father himself, Pierce was determined to be the kind of parent he never had. "I wasn't a father," he once said. "I was just Pierce. Then I became daddy." The family expanded further in 1983 when Cassandra gave birth to their son, Sean. With 5 people under one roof, life felt vibrant, secure, and full. Despite the demands of his career, Pierce always prioritized family, pouring energy into creating a warm and loving home environment, the kind he had longed for as a child. A turning point came in 1981 when Cassandra was cast as a Bond girl in For Your Eyes Only. Ironically, she stepped into the world of 007 before Pierce himself had the chance. During production, Pierce was introduced to Albert Broccoli, the very man who would later consider him for Bond. Cassandra, ever supportive, encouraged him to chase the opportunity. Broccoli was intrigued by the young actor's presence and began to seriously consider him for the franchise. But as long as Remington Steele owned his schedule, the dream had to be deferred. Cassandra championed the idea of Pierce as Bond with every fiber of her being, but heartbreakingly, she would never witness it come true. Everything unraveled in 1987. Just as Pierce was working on The Deceivers in India, Cassandra began experiencing troubling health symptoms. They returned to London, and the diagnosis was devastating. Ovarian cancer. Not localized, but widespread and aggressive. The news hit them both like a tidal wave. "From the very first day, we knew we were in for the fight of our lives," Pierce later recalled. What followed was an agonizing 4-year ordeal. Cassandra endured 8 major surgeries and nearly 2 years of intense chemotherapy. Her hair fell out, her body weakened, yet her spirit remained intact. She faced every treatment option with unflinching resolve, demanding second opinions and making informed decisions. Throughout the battle, Pierce stood beside her, calling himself the silent witness, always present, even when powerless. Their young son, Sean, barely old enough to understand, would often pretend to be her doctor. Small acts of love in the midst of unspeakable pain. The disease had already claimed Cassandra's mother, suggesting a genetic component, which cast a shadow of fear over Charlotte's future as well. This realization spurred Pierce to become an outspoken advocate for genetic testing and early detection, hoping to spare others from the heartbreak he was enduring. Sadly, by December 1991, Cassandra's fight came to an end. On one final quiet night, as they lay side by side, Pierce clung to her, grief-stricken, but grateful for the love they had shared. As Cassandra neared her final moments, she turned to Pierce and whispered with quiet resolve, "Please, darling, don't worry. It's just life coming to a close." Even in her last hours, she was the strong one, maintaining dignity and grace in the face of the inevitable. She rejected the idea of hospitals and machines, choosing instead to pass on her own terms, with calm and control. On December 28, 1991, Cassandra Harris died at the age of just 43. Pierce and her son Christopher were by her side. Charlotte, away in London studying to become an actress, was on the phone, listening with heartbreak as her mother's voice faded. Christmas had only just passed, a season of joy for many. But for Pierce, it became a time of devastating sorrow, as he was left organizing her funeral instead of celebrating the holidays. One of the most agonizing tasks he faced next was breaking the news to their 8-year-old son, Sean, that his mother was gone. Overnight, Pierce went from devoted husband to single father of 3. Sean was only 8, Christopher was 19, and Charlotte had just turned 20. Pierce described it as the moment he truly came to understand grief, an overwhelming wave that crashed over him with no warning. But still, he carried on. He often said that Cassandra had shaped the man he became. "She is present in every fiber of who I am," he once reflected, a sentiment that would stay with him forever. In 1994, Pierce Brosnan was officially chosen to take on the iconic role of James Bond, a casting decision that carried deep personal meaning. Cassandra, before her illness, had appeared as a Bond girl in For Your Eyes Only in 1981, and had always championed Pierce for the role of 007. Her belief in his talent was unshakable. Though she didn't live to see it, her influence loomed large over that moment. It wasn't just a professional triumph for Pierce. It was an emotional, bittersweet fulfillment of a dream they had once shared. His debut in GoldenEye was a high-stakes endeavor not just for him, but for the entire Bond legacy. The production had already lost multiple directors. The budget had ballooned to $60 million, and MGM was teetering on financial collapse. If the film underperformed, the Bond franchise would likely have come to an end. But instead, GoldenEye was a stunning success, raking in $353 million worldwide. One of the most iconic scenes, the tank chase through the streets of St. Petersburg, cost $8 million alone to film. Brosnan handled 90% of his own stunts, including an intense bungee jump from a 220-meter dam in Switzerland, so dangerous that no insurer would cover it. Released exactly 30 years after Sean Connery's last official Bond outing in Diamonds Are Forever, GoldenEye wasn't just a movie, it was a full resurrection of the franchise. It even inspired Nintendo's GoldenEye 007 video game, which revolutionized the gaming industry and introduced Bond to a whole new generation. The victories continued to pile up. Brosnan's next 3 Bond films collectively grossed an astronomical $1.238 billion, but those box office highs were accompanied by personal lows. When Tomorrow Never Dies premiered in 1997, Pierce was still mourning Cassandra's passing, even though 6 years had gone by. He channeled that pain into his performance. One of the film's standout scenes, a high-speed motorcycle chase through the streets of Saigon, cost $12 million and required the construction of an entire Vietnamese street set in the UK. By 1999, The World Is Not Enough brought in Bond's longest-ever opening sequence at 14 minutes, as well as the franchise's first female lead villain. The production even executed a genuine oil pipeline explosion using 120 gallons of gasoline, generating a fireball visible from 10 miles away. Then came Die Another Day in 2002, which marked Bond's 40th anniversary. That film nearly ended Brosnan's life when a parasailing stunt went awry, dragging him underwater into 30-foot waves. He was hospitalized with hypothermia. Still, Die Another Day featured some of the most over-the-top production pieces, including a $300,000 invisible Aston Martin and an enormous ice palace built in Iceland using 1,000 tons of ice. Beyond Bond, Brosnan's star continued to rise. In 1996, he won the Saturn Award for Best Actor, edging out none other than Sean Connery, who had been nominated for his role in The Rock. It was the first time a current Bond actor had surpassed a former one in critical acclaim. Even Steven Spielberg was so impressed after GoldenEye that he personally reached out to offer Brosnan the role of Indiana Jones. But Pierce declined, choosing to stay loyal to Bond, a decision that likely cost him upwards of $50 million. Still, his commitment to the franchise never wavered. Everything seemed to be going his way until 2004. While filming After the Sunset in the Bahamas, Brosnan was in excellent shape, actively training and pitching ideas for Bond 21. Then, at exactly 2:47 p.m., he received a phone call that would change everything. The producers had decided to part ways. There was no warning, no conversation, just a 47-second call. "You were a great James Bond. Thank you very much. Goodbye." That was all. The coldness of the dismissal stung even more given his past successes. Die Another Day had earned a record-breaking $431.9 million, making it the highest-grossing Bond film at the time. Yet behind the scenes, the decision had already been made to replace him with a younger actor. They waited until he was vulnerable and alone before delivering the news. In the span of just 3 days, Brosnan's career took a nosedive. 3 major movie deals fell apart, studios backed away, and internal studio emails revealed that he was now viewed as too Bond, making him difficult to cast in other roles. His asking price plummeted from $12 million per film to just $3 million. He had to let go of 12 longtime staff members. Depression set in. His children witnessed him in tears. The release of the Casino Royale trailer, featuring his replacement, struck like a dagger. It was his legacy, handed off without so much as a thank you. Worse yet, he later discovered that the producers had been secretly auditioning other actors for 2 years, all while pretending to have faith in him. The betrayal, he said, hurt even more than the termination itself. But amid the heartbreak and professional chaos, there was a silver lining. Back in 1994, just months before officially donning the tuxedo as James Bond, Pierce experienced something truly unexpected. On April 8th, at 7:30 p.m., during a beach party in Cabo San Lucas, he met Keely Shea Smith. She was a journalist, and unlike most, she wasn't starstruck. She liked him for who he was, not for the role he played. They talked for hours, long past midnight. Within 3 weeks, Pierce invited her to meet his children. 6 months later, she moved in. What began as an unexpected spark quickly grew into a deep, genuine bond. Years later, that relationship would become Pierce's emotional anchor when everything else in his life seemed to be unraveling. In 2001, they tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony in Ireland, at the ancient Ballintubber Abbey, which had been standing for nearly 800 years. The wedding cost $2.3 million and was attended by just 100 close family members and friends. Judi Dench and Liam Neeson attended the ceremony in traditional Irish attire, with Liam donning a classic kilt and breaking down in tears the moment he watched Keely make her way down the aisle. But while the celebration of love was deeply emotional, the shadow of a devastating family legacy loomed large. Charlotte Brosnan was only 41 when she passed away in 2013, and her death wasn't a standalone tragedy. It marked the 3rd time that a devastatingly similar fate struck the same family. Her grandmother had succumbed to ovarian cancer, followed by her mother, Cassandra Harris, who lost her battle with the same disease at just 43. Then came Charlotte, whose life ended even earlier than her mother's. After a hard-fought 3-year battle against ovarian cancer, a disease chillingly known as the silent killer, Charlotte died, mirroring the losses that had already ravaged her lineage. This form of cancer is particularly deadly because it often goes unnoticed until its late stages. A staggering 75% of cases are diagnosed when the illness is already advanced. slashing survival odds from as high as 90% to a grim 20 to 30%. Born in 1971, Charlotte experienced another life-altering moment early on. After losing her biological father, Dermot Harris, she was adopted by Pierce Brosnan in 1986, who gave her not only his surname, but his unconditional love and unwavering devotion. However, no amount of affection could ward off the cruel genetic curse that had haunted her family. For Pierce, Charlotte's illness was not just the painful loss of a daughter. It was a harrowing rerun of the most painful chapter of his past. In 1991, he had stood by helplessly as his beloved wife, Cassandra, endured grueling treatments, including 8 surgeries and a relentless 18 months of chemotherapy, only to succumb to the same vicious disease. The experience reshaped his entire reality. He later confessed that witnessing a loved one deteriorate so profoundly changed him forever, saying, "You're confronting death itself. Everything in your life is altered." 22 years later, that same unbearable narrative returned with Charlotte. At the 2014 Stand Up to Cancer fundraiser, Pierce bared his soul before an audience, stating with heartfelt emotion, "I held the strong, beautiful, and generous hand of my first wife Cassie as ovarian cancer claimed her far too soon, and just a year ago, I held the hand of my wonderful and funny daughter Charlotte as she too was taken by this cruel, inherited disease." His words were not just steeped in sorrow, they were a cry born of grief repeating itself with merciless familiarity. One of Pierce's dearest friends, Bronwyn Royance, remarked that Charlotte's illness brought back a cloud of darkness, forcing Pierce to relive every moment of anguish all over again. By then, Pierce had found love anew with Keely Shea Smith, marrying her in 2001 and building a family with sons Dylan and Paris. But when Charlotte's diagnosis came, it unearthed every trauma he thought he'd buried. Despite being consumed with pain, Keely remained his anchor, holding him together through the unrelenting emotional storm. Then, fate delivered an unthinkably cruel twist. On June 14, 2013, Charlotte married her longtime partner, Alex Smith. Just 2 weeks later, on June 28th, she was gone. At precisely 2:00 p.m. on that Friday afternoon in London, she passed away, surrounded by Alex, her 2 children, 15-year-old Isabella and 8-year-old Lucas, and her brothers Christopher and Sean. Born in London and trained as an actress there, her life ended where it had begun. In the wake of her passing, Pierce issued a brief but deeply moving statement. Charlotte had fought her illness with extraordinary grace, dignity, and inner strength. Even in her final days, she had insisted on organizing her wedding, determined to leave her children with one lasting message, that love still mattered. The tragedy felt like a cruel echo. Isabella was 15, the same age Charlotte had been when her own mother was diagnosed, and Lucas was just 8, the very age Sean had been when Cassandra died. The generational repetition was heartbreakingly precise. Friends often described Charlotte as a mother who poured her entire being into her children. Her close friend Claire Beckwith recalled her saying she no longer cared about acting. "This is my family," Charlotte said. "I just want to give them all the love I can." And then, in the blink of an eye, Alex Smith transitioned from being a newlywed to a grieving widower, now solely responsible for raising 2 children who had just witnessed their mother's slow disappearance. Pierce, now also a grandfather, found himself grieving anew while trying to remain strong for those still holding on. But not everyone in the family was able to weather the emotional fallout. Charlotte's brother, Christopher Brosnan, had been profoundly affected by Cassandra's death back in 1991. He was only 19 at the time and had shown early promise, working on Pierce's Bond films such as Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. But emotional trauma took its toll. By 1996, he had been fined £1,000 for drunk driving. In 1997, he served 3 months in jail for a repeat offense. His descent continued, into drugs like GHB and heroin. He collapsed outside a London club and fell into a coma. In 2012, at just 32, he was again arrested, this time for heroin possession, and became entrenched in the Brixton drug scene, a tragic fall from grace, far removed from the glitz of Hollywood. In June 2024, for the first time in 2 decades, Christopher made a rare public appearance. Paparazzi captured a photo of him outside a grocery store in London, looking gaunt and alone at 51. Meanwhile, Keely Shea Smith was facing a battle of her own, albeit of a different nature. For years, tabloids relentlessly mocked her weight, posting cruel before and after pictures and flooding the internet with criticism. Pierce, however, never wavered in his defense of her. In a now famous online post, he wrote, "I love every curve of her body. She is the most beautiful woman in my eyes, not only because of who she is, but because she gave birth to our 5 children." By 2024, Keely had quietly lost 100 pounds, not through surgery, but through walking, swimming, healthy eating, and self-respect. She credited patience and gratitude for her transformation, writing, "For all my body has given and achieved in 60 years. That August, she and Pierce celebrated 23 years of marriage and 31 years together. Through every hardship, personal loss, public judgment, and family tragedy, they stood firm. At their anniversary, Pierce described her as his north, south, east, and west, and Keely responded, "You are the finest, loveliest, and tenderest person I've ever known." The couple was last seen supporting George Clooney's Broadway debut in April 2025. Keely looking radiant in black lace, and Pierce, ever the charismatic presence, continuing to shine despite everything. Still active in Hollywood, he took on the role of Dr. Fate in Black Adam in 2022, with the director praising him as the perfect blend of strength and serenity. At 71, Pierce remains one of the industry's most admired figures, not just for his talent but for his resilience. He's taken his pain and turned it into purpose, becoming a global advocate. As a UNICEF ambassador since 2001, he has marched with Greenpeace, spoken out against nuclear testing, and raised vital funds for cancer research. He once even boycotted the GoldenEye premiere in France to protest nuclear proliferation. During Charlotte's illness, he said he would do anything, make any call, travel any distance, plead with anyone, just to save her life. Though he couldn't stop fate from taking her, he has since committed himself to trying to save others.